Actually,
That's attractive.
can I move y'all around a little bit?
Oh,
towards the
sure. Where do
house?
you would like? Call the Board of Adjustment meeting to order. I think we have a quorum today, and I will entertain a motion on the minutes. Motion to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And I think we don't have any business today, so we will hear a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
All right. So moved. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. Somebody gave me a gavel. Call the planning board meeting into order. Ask the board to direct their attention to the minutes of the previous meeting, and if everything looks okay, entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approved. Okay, we'll open the public hearing today, January 21, February 18, 2025. The first hearing is ZTA 1, 2025, zoning text amendments to Chapter 153 of the Unified Development Ordinance.
Okay, and I know some of these y'all are going to want to have some discussion on. Just tell me when you get to one you want to discuss. Some of them are minor, and if you want to go through them, we can. So the first one here is accessory structures. And we did not change any language. We just reworded it because if you looked at what was in the ordinance, it repeated itself. And so we just consolidated it, like, because it said water wells on any lot, and then it repeated itself. Water wells may be located in any front, side, or rear yard. So we just consolidated it, and then the other thing we did is it was mixed. It would say some things about residential, and then it would say some things about commercial. So we grouped the residential and the commercial together just to make it read better. So we didn't actually change any ordinances. We just rearranged it and made it an easier read and easier to understand. Any questions about that one? Okay. The next one, there's a chapter that deals with the establishment of zoning districts, and it gives a description for each zoning district. So we just reworded it a little bit because in some places it would say one family, in some places it would say single family, and we just wanted all the wording to match. Instead of it being inconsistent, we just wanted it to flow better and have the same language throughout. There was some unnecessary language that was in there, and then in our ordinance, the highway commercial district is abbreviated as highway business or named as highway business in a couple places, so we just wanted to make that match so that it was all consistent. Any questions about that one?
No.
Residential office district. This one had a few grammatical errors, and then back in 2021 they had removed multifamily as a permitted use from that, but the wording multifamily was still listed under minimum lot width. So since it was taken out as a use, we wanted to take it out on that minimum lot width. Any questions for that one?
No.
Okay. Highway commercial district. This one had a comment in there about planned unit developments having prescribed standards. And that's because it used to be a conditional use permit, and we took those out and we made a planned unit development a conditional district. So that wording was unnecessary. We took that out. Another thing we started doing is our ordinance throughout will list a section number and not the title to the section, and we felt like it just made it clearer and easier if you had the chapter number and the title of the chapter. So we added some of those titles to go with the section numbers. We added a link to off-street parking because when you do highway commercial district, you have to have the off-street parking. So it's just a link. So no really changes to the language or the rules, just adding some stuff to make it easier. Any questions about that one?
No.
Next, 153.127. This is application requirements, review procedures, and watershed overlay cluster developments. Same thing I said earlier. We added the section titles beside the section number links. There were some time frames in there that don't actually align with our policy. So we took out the time frames just so that it does align with our ordinance better and our internal policies better. Any questions for that one?
Was that the one where you struck out like the 21 days and all?
Yeah, that was the one.
So does that increase the days or decreases the days?
It's probably decreases the days. What was happening is on sketch plan, it kept saying 21 days for sketch plan, and what we do with those sketch plans is they go to the next staff review committee meeting. So depending on when you submit one, like for example, we got one last week and it was the day after the staff review committee meeting. So it has to wait until the next committee meeting, which is more than 21 days.
Okay.
But we get those comments back to them the week of the staff review committee meeting. So it just makes it align with what our policies are, because those have to go to that meeting, because that meeting, when we say staff review, it's not just staff, it's NCDOT, it's water and sewer, it's erosion control from the county, it's all the departments that will look at a project and say it's feasible or not feasible. So we just wanted it, in some situations, like if you submit your sketch plan right after we've had one of those meetings, we can't get you your comments in 21 days. It needs to wait till the next staff review committee meeting.
Okay, gotcha.
So it had nothing to do with just needing more time, it just.
Right, we don't need more time to review it, we just need it to align with what our calendar, actually, the meeting schedule of our calendar.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions on that one? Commercial Center District, we added those section titles, and then same thing, we adjusted the time frame for sketch plan and formal submittals to align with what we have in the other section. Any questions about that one? And I've got those, I know you've got them in front of you, but I also have the line documents if you want them on the screen. Non-conforming manufactured home parks. There was a whole section that was deleted when they did the 160D rewrite, but there were still references to that section, so it kept saying see section .202, and there was no, that section's no longer in there. So we just crossed all that out because it's a non-existing section.
Gene, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Did you already skip, are we on the commercial center district one?
We passed that one. You want to go back to that one?
I just had a quick question. I just realized I had a question on this.
Let me get to it.
There's a couple of them that I had noticed that it refers to the city's website
For the schedule.
for a schedule. Okay.
You want to see where it is on the city's website?
I was just wondering if we shouldn't define that schedule in the ordinance, so that we don't have to refer to a different.
Yearly. It changes every year because it's actually specific dates. So what it is, it's a schedule, and I can show you, but it has a column for application deadlines, column for the technical review committee, column for board of adjustment, column or planning board, and a column for city council. And so
I know it's hard to imagine in today's world someone not having access to a website, but I guess that's just where my mind went. But.
we could add a line about refer to the office. You know, it could come. You know, they can get it from us. Like we can hand it out, email it. We can add some kind of wording like that.
Okay.
But we can't actually put the schedule in there because it changes every year.
Okay, got it.
But that is a good point about having access.
I mean, God forbid, something happens where we have to rely on what's written on the paper at some point,
Well, try and look up something on the GIS today.
Yeah.
See how that works.
When they
Right.
apply.
And then we do. Anybody that gets an application from us gets a schedule.
Yeah.
So we'll look at that. I'm just going to make myself a note real quick. Okay. And then non-conforming home parks. Did anybody have any questions about that one? That's the one I talked about. The section disappeared. We wanted to make the links that refer to the section disappear.
I didn't have anything on that one.
Okay, next one I think is one that you wanted to have some conversation about. So for variances, and give me just a second because I am going to pull up that section and what it says. And what our proposed changes are. And just to be clear, we are not asking to get rid of the time frame, the expiration date. We're just... So what it says right now is that if you haven't obtained a building permit or certificate of occupancy within 1 year from the date of the board's decision, then it expires. We have a situation every now and then where, say, somebody submitted a variance to subdivide a piece of land. Y'all granted the variance. The property owners had a surveyor that did the plat for them. It took them some time to get their ducks in a row, but now they're ready to build. Well, come to find out, the surveyor never recorded the plat for them. And so now, like, an option would be they have to go through the whole process again. Nothing's changed. The plat hasn't changed. What they're asking for hasn't changed. It just expired. So what we did do, Ashley did some research for y'all, just to give you an idea. Mecklenburg County is the only other place that she could find that has a 1-year expiration date. Gastonia has a 2-year expiration date. The city of Gastonia has a 2-year. Cherryville has 2 years. Dallas, Stanley, Catawba, Hickory, and Belmont, they don't even have expiration dates for their variances. And we're not asking to get rid of the expiration date. We're just asking if it were to expire and our ordinance hasn't changed, the language hasn't changed, that it would affect it, and nothing about the plan has changed or the variance, that we could just approve that on a staff level to go ahead and issue the permit instead of them making them, follow the application deadline, come back to y'all, and go through the process again.
Kind of like Century Drug up here, what they just did.
That was a little bit different. That was a conditional use permit, and then they actually changed their plan. So that
Oh, okay.
that would have had to come back regardless.
I don't see any point in making everybody come back to sit in front of that for.
We were just trying to make it more efficient. If there were changes, obviously we would want them to come back. If there was anything different on the site plan, we would want them to come back. But if nothing in our ordinance had changed so that the rules were still the same, and if the actual plan was still the same, we were just asking that on a staff level, we could extend that expiration date and issue a permit.
What kind of, historically, how many have expired? Is this a common thing, or?
I think this is the first one I've.
Well, okay, so it is a little bit more common in variances that this, as it's written, what we currently have, doesn't apply to. So, when we were in discussion, I used a recent, and I can come up there if that's easier, but, a recent case where, the gentleman had, the 3 homes on one lot, and he wanted to subdivide those.
Right.
Well, he was doing that for, financing purposes. Let's say that fell through and, he just didn't get around to recording it.
Right.
Instead of, making him go back through the process, because our process says you have to have a building permit or a certificate of occupancy. Those don't apply to his situation at all. So as long as the plan had not changed at all and the variance and everything stood as is, previously those were just being approved. I mean, if it passed the time frame and they needed to resubmit the fee for filing, that's different. But nothing in our ordinance gave that an actual expiration date for that variance. So we were trying to clean up that portion of it. In addition to taking care of any other situation. That way, these cleanups are going to continue to happen as we work through our ordinance, but we don't want to keep bringing the same section to you multiple times.
Is there a particular case right now that this applies to?
We've got a subdivision plat that it would apply to.
Which one?
It was, how long ago was that?
It was already approved.
It was approved, but do you remember the year?
22. But it went to, I believe, at that point it hadn't been sold yet, and then GIS is not going to work, so we can see it all. But then they actually demolished the homes on the property and cleaned up the site. So they've put a lot of work into that. That was Poplar Street. So, our previous interpretation of that, since it did not apply to at that point, an actual building permit, because we wouldn't have allowed that part, or a certificate of occupancy, those were allowed to be extended. And for that one, we got lucky, nothing had changed, but we have nothing that says that those expire and need to come back to you.
So what about zoning ordinance? If it changes, it would automatically come back? Like if our recommended zoning ordinance?
Well, and I'm not saying, but yes, if we had made a zoning text amendment, and then when we look at this, they come back and it's expired, and we look at it and we're like, oh, we've changed setbacks, which is probably not going to happen. But if there were something that we had changed in the ordinance, like if it allowed for residential multifamily, but we had taken it out of that zoning district, we would bring it back to you. If there was something in our rules or our ordinance that had changed, we'd bring it back, because there's a chance
As long as
the
nothing
ordinance could
changes,
change.
yeah.
Or if they, oh, we thought we needed our lot line here, but we need it 10 feet this way, it would come back to you.
Gotcha.
So any changes at all, basically.
I would say that ordinance changes would be something that's important to look at, but more importantly, if we have a board change or a staff change or a political situation change where you think a project that was previously approved may not get approved again if it comes back before the board, that kind of gives you the power to approve something that has expired, in my mind. Am I looking at that incorrectly?
I get what you're saying, but I guess my point is, and I'm not trying to have power to approve or disapprove. I could care less about that. My point is, if nothing has changed, if not one single thing about the project's changed, and I had a board here that followed the rules, that went through the procedure, that held their quasi-judicial hearing, listened to the evidence, and made a decision based on that evidence. If the time frame is the only thing holding them back, it's just a time frame, nothing else. I just
So
don't.
what the case you're referring to though is from 2022, so that's 3 years now past its expiration. Am I misunderstanding that?
I'm just using that one.
That was just an example.
Oh, well, I thought you had a real case.
Well, I mean, they brought the subdivision plat back to us. It needs to get recorded. So there's a question in our office as to whether or not it should come back or not. And so we're looking at this part of the ordinance for other changes anyway.
Okay.
But 2022, you were here, you would have approved it.
Well, I don't know. If that's not a real case, if that's just a hypothetical, I don't know if that was, I don't know why the push to change this language. What is the reason? Just,
Well, one, some of the language is incorrect. When it
I
talks
mean,
about,
this specific change to give you, the staff personnel, the authority to approve that. Why
just,
that?
we thought it was an easier process, more streamlined. We have 2 full-time people in our office. Anytime anything comes to y'all, there's an application process, there's a review process. It's just more work. We were just trying to streamline, make things more efficient.
Okay,
So-
I mean, that's a valid request. I understand that, sure. I just want to make sure that the language that we use, I didn't see that there was any limit on it. I mean, it could be 20 years old, it comes in, and if nothing's changed,
Well, here's one thing that we talked through, and I don't know how to fix this. So if you say you get a variance on a plat, you have to record language on that plat that says it was approved by variance. And then you take that plat and you record it with the Register of Deeds. Can I then tell you that it expires in a year? It's recorded with the Register of Deeds.
well,
I
what
can't-
is?
I can't make
what
them
is
unrecord the plat.
What is the legal appeal process? I mean, because it's a board of adjustment, does that have to be appealed to court, to Superior Court then?
An
Does the
appeal.
court have to sort it out?
For a Board of Adjustment appeal, I'd have to look and see what the ordinance says. I think a Board of Adjustment, I know you have 30 days. I know that if you appeal our interpretation, it comes to y'all, but I'd have to look it up and see if you appeal a Board of Adjustment.
Because if a board of adjustment approval expires and then it's approved later by the city, does that subvert the public's ability to appeal that ruling? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
It seems like we're kind of opening up some legal questions that,
What about the idea of not putting the time limit on it? We have that option, right? Why
And
don't
that's
we
what I was going to ask. The reason for a 1-year limit, the purpose of it, I'm assuming, is so that we clean things up and there's not some variance approval that's 20 years old that's just set in
Well,
someplace.
They're not talking about 20 years old. They're saying maybe 1 or 2 years
Yeah,
after the
but
first
why,
year.
why put, there are some communities that do not have that limit. Why are we putting a limit on it? Is it because we wanna not have approved variances just hanging out there forever? And we're saying in a year you have to, they expire. But there are some communities that don't have a limit.
I think the point of the limit is so that you do have that option at a year for us to reevaluate it and say, did the ordinance change? did something about it change that need to be reevaluated. And it says, you know, that we have the authority to either issue the permit if nothing's changed or advise the applicant to reapply. And to me, that means if maybe something substantial, it's expired, something substantial happened on the lot beside of it, it was developed in a different way, then we're not quite comfortable with that, you're gonna need to reapply. Things have changed. I think that's the benefit of having an expiration date, is so that at some point it can be looked at again
Does give
for
them a
change.
sense of urgency, I guess, to get their stuff done. But I don't know if there is a benefit to you guys to extend the deadline or just delete the deadline. I mean, would that have the same effect?
To extend it or delete it. We weren't even asking to get rid of it. We were comfortable keeping the deadline. We were just in situations where there were no changes. We were hoping that on a staff level, we could extend it.
And I really don't have a problem with that piece of it. It's just kind of, from my understanding, kind of the purpose of those things, such as a time limit. Why is it in place? And you've explained that. Why is it 1 year and not 2? And why do some communities have none? And so I guess that was just, you know, I'm comfortable with the staff acting, you know, on behalf of the board and looking at these things, and your discretion, if there is something that's complex, to alert us and bring it back to us. And maybe a piece of that would be to notify us when you do grant an extension.
Okay. In Monte, it was Superior Court. Superior Court hears appeals for Board of
Right.
Adjustment.
So how does someone appeal your approving a expired variance?
So we're doing hypothetical. You're saying hypothetically, if you grant me this and I approve somebody's expired variance, who would appeal it?
Does that open you up to liability if they sue in court?
It's the citizen that would, the citizen has the right to appeal my decision. And I don't think the citizen's gonna, if I grant them an extension, are you saying if I don't grant them an extension?
Or if you do grant it and against someone else's wishes? I mean, sometimes these hearings get pretty contentious, so I don't know if someone would be upset. Like,
Does a
they
neighbor
say-
have a right to bring a complaint
I don't
in that
know.
situation, or is it just the citizen
No, I
that
don't
applied
think
for the
so.
variance?
I don't think so, and that's another problem, because if they were denied, they only have 30 days from the date of the planning board's decision to file an appeal with Superior Court.
Right.
If you later deny it, which you really haven't denied anything because it expired, they would just have to go back to the process. You know, without doing further research on it, just sitting here right now, I'm thinking that removing, if you wanna do this, the way to do it is to remove the time limit. Then the problem is, it's kinda like John mentioned, now you've got variances are sitting out there that if they pop back up 20 years from now and say, hey, well, I got this variance, I wanna go do it.
Right.
Who's gonna be around to even
Does say.
recall what was
Yeah,
going on, let alone
I
everything?
think that's the reason you have an expiration, because, you know, in some of these planning departments, you may have, you know, 2, 3, 4 different people transition through that position before it would come back up, so. I feel like there should be an expiration date on it. It's just whether or not the board wants it brought back to them, or whether or not staff can go ahead and say, yes, we'll give you another year, 6 months, whatever it may be. You could simplify it too, though. You could say, you know, whether or not the staff member, either with the assistance of the manager or city attorney, feels that this is okay to extend it out. And that may help the board realize it's not just, you know, staff, it's staff and city attorney that are saying, here's the reason why. And just a common, why would something like that happen? COVID is a prime example. COVID slowed everything down, you know, supply chain for stop, so you may need, nothing changed, but you need another year to get this project done because of COVID. So I see the staff point, it's really saving time and effort with the board to have to go back through it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that's the reasoning behind doing this. But I also get what Monty's saying. I mean, it still means coming back up and basically you gave them 1 year and then the 1 year didn't matter. From a procedural standpoint, I mean, I guess if planning department denies it, if we did do this and planning department denies it, then they don't have a right to appeal that because it's expired and there's no statutory right created by an appeal, or I'm sorry, a denial by staff. So they would just have to go through the process.
Right, and I was gonna say, we wouldn't deny it. I think it's either we approve the extension or we send them back to Board of
Yeah,
Adjustment.
basically they go back and go back through the process. Or, just trying to think outside the box a little bit, or say, hey, I mean, either extend the deadline 2 years so we can avoid a COVID situation, or, I mean, is there anything that says we can't go and do a short procedure for bringing it back in front of the board to get approval, basically, based on the extension? And I think I mentioned that in email.
Fast track. Kind of.
Well, they're public hearings, so we still have to follow the notifications, all
I
that.
know, and that gets you back to the original problem of, are we skipping what Mike's talking about, that
It's due process. It's due process, really. It's what it is.
Because if you set a year, I'm stuck on the year deadline.
Well, and there's no statutory requirement to have an expiration date.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why I'm suggesting, if we're gonna have the expiration, then I think we gotta push, because I think at that point, you're creating a quasi-planning board, or at least a decision. Because then you're saying, well, we're gonna approve or deny what the planning board already said after it's expired. So they've got an expired variance that now you're saying, oh, well, it's okay, we're gonna extend it. So I agree with what you're saying. I just think that, I think we open a can of worms versus either no expiration, do a 2 year, or we come up with just an alternate solution that allows them to go back and get an extension.
May I suggest something?
Yes, sir.
I know staff likes the 1 year, because you like to look at it again. Can we put a window in there to where after 3 years, it must come back to the board? But in that 1 to 3 year period, staff can review it and extend it.
That's what we were saying about 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically give them a 3-year deadline, but
I don't see any big issue with that. Just within the 2 years, staff can administratively approve or.
That gives them the ability after 1 year to reexamine.
And I think maybe a simple way to do that is just do, instead of a 1 year, do 2 years. And I don't see too many, unless we're in a World War III situation, I don't see too many events that would keep somebody from doing it in 2 years. It gives them an extra year, and then after that, it automatically comes back to the board. So that would be I think a good compromise, as long as staff's okay with that 2 years.
I don't have a problem with it. I think the 1 year was just,
That's,
a good, like, a lot of changes in a year, so that if there were changes, that happened, then it would come back. I mean, if we give it 2 years, the ordinance could change in the middle, and they're still locked into that.
That's why I like the window. That gives you that 1 year limit, so you can reexamine it. Plus, after a certain period of time, it'll have to come back to the board regardless.
But why would we even, why would we have that year? I mean,
Well, staff doesn't want it
that
out there
would be
too
at
long
2 years.
without them being able to reexamine. And
But if you're
The
seeing,
window would give them the ability to approve it without it having to come back.
Right,
to the
I
board.
understand, I think simple is better than adding more steps, but, I think the issue for us to decide too is, are we comfortable with the staff making that decision? And I am. The thing of having go into 2 years, I think that gives that additional amount of time. Why we would have them look at it in 1 year, I'm still not real clear. You feel our staff would be more comfortable?
I think that would be better for staff. Not to be locked in for 2 years, but the 1 year.
Got
So
it.
what you're saying is it still expires in 1 year, but if
It
it,
has to come back to staff in 1 year, but it only has to come back to the board in 2 or 3 years. To give them a window to operate in and still re-examine that variance without too long a period of time passing.
okay,
The way I see it, you gotta be okay with you're delegating that authority. If you're okay with that, then I don't have an issue with it. Then it's make it a year, make it 2 years, whatever. You delegate that authority to them. If you don't wanna delegate the authority, then you don't, and you're gonna have to deal with it.
is there, I mean, I completely 100% get the ability to speed up the process helps. My fear for these ladies is they're buying liability that, for the city. Is there any possibility that they incur liability by making these decisions?
Certainly. Yeah,
So-
I mean, you're delegating that authority to them.
Is that something that you guys really want? I mean, have you thought about it on that side?
From city attorney's position, I would say I'd rather not have that.
That's what I would say.
That's just me from trying to keep things simple, and I would much rather have folks complaining about y'all than them.
But don't we already have a lot of that authority? I mean, not for the variance, because it was already granted technically. But every time we sign a plat, or as the plat review officer, the subdivision administrator,
question you do.
watershed, all
Yeah.
of that.
It's just, do you want more?
I-
Do they want-
Extending an expiration date, I think what
It's the
she's saying
least
is
of
the
our
least of
worries.
our worries, and the least of what we have liability
And-
for,
and
but.
you're probably 100% right, you know, because I don't even know how much y'all
Okay.
have to do, but I think the way I'm looking at it right now, and of course, this was, you know, it's relatively new to me, because I just, you know, started looking at it today, that's how I kind of see it.
Yeah.
Now, I may be totally missing something too, but I think the crux of the matter is that you're delegating that authority if you choose to do so. That I think it's okay. I don't see any, unless I go back and find some statute that says we can't do that. I think we can. It's just, do you want to put that on their plate, or do you want to leave it on yours?
But the way it's proposed also gives the staff the opportunity to say, this is complicated, we're going to bring this back to the board.
Yeah,
So
they have
that,
discretion.
so that discretion would be that within the intent to delegate is giving the staff discretion to bring it back to the board as well as make that decision. So it's not just that they would make a decision to, decline it or approve it, but it gives them the opportunity to bring it back to us. And that, for me, is the clause that gives me the confidence to delegate.
Right, and can we just take a minute to look at the proposed wording? And because what we need to do is figure out if you're gonna say, yes, well, you can do this, or no, you can't do this, and if you're saying no, because this still goes to the council, then you have to say what your recommendation is, like what you recommend. So what we've asked is that required permits have not been obtained within 1 year, or the plat has not been recorded like it was supposed to be. Then if the variance is expired, the zoning administrator shall have authority to either issue the permit and approve the plat. If the zoning administrator determines that based on the board's decision, the circumstances for granting the variance have not changed and no changes to the ordinance would affect that decision, or advise the applicant to reapply for a variance to be heard by the Board of Adjustment. So we just need to figure out what is your recommendation to this wording right here?
My recommendation is to delete section F and change the timing to 2 years. That's my suggestion. I would love to hear what everyone else proposes.
So at the end of 2 years, what happens?
It's expired.
And then
It comes back to the board.
completely, they'd have to make a new
Yeah.
application, even though nothing's changed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any suggestions on, like, how many people agree with him? Because we're voting on the whole text amendment. Like, that's Monty's recommendation.
I think we have to go through the rest of it and then make a motion at the end, and if there's a part that would have a recommendation in that.
Yeah,
But does everybody agree with the recommendation? Or we just do it at the
I
motion?
would rather
at the
do
end?
it now, that way we don't go back to the end.
Just get to the end? Okay. Or y'all, do y'all want to move on? Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about on this one? I don't want to cut anybody short. If you want to talk about it some more, I was just trying to help us.
No,
Like,
it's
it's
a
a
good, it's a good process for us as a board to go through and begin to really identify kind of staff board roles. And I think that's been a good part of this discussion for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next section, 153.118, was put in the ordinance sometime before 2004 for somebody's miscellaneous project, and we have never used it. Nobody has ever rezoned to it. It's just sitting in the ordinance. There's no land. We already have residential office. This is residential office, single family. There's not one single piece of land that has been zoned this since before 2004.
Delete it.
So we just wanted to get rid of it. The next one, this was just, we're cleaning up our procedures. The ordinance used to say crazy stuff like we need 8 copies of this and 3 copies of that. We're trying to get our processes all the same. So this is on submission and review procedure for major subdivisions. We just cleaned up the language a little bit, and we made it also on sketch plans. We had 2 different sections of the ordinance that said what is required on a sketch plan, and they were different. They didn't match. So we made those sections match. It's the same requirements on the sketch plan. And then this is the same thing. We took away that 21 days because there's sometimes we just can't get that sketch plan to the TRC in a 21-day time frame. Any questions about that one? Residential multifamily district. We just added, there's additional requirements that comes with multifamily screening, parking, landscaping. So we added these links to those sections, and the watershed sometimes applies, most of the time applies. So that's just another example where we're not really changing the requirements, we're just adding in some sections that help it. Non-conforming structures, this one we might have some more discussion on. So what the ordinance currently says is that if a residential structure is destroyed to an extent of more than 60% of its replacement cost at the time of destruction, it can be reconstructed on a lot, but you only have 6 months. And so we have situation like right now where a guy's house is burned down and it's non-conforming and he wants to build it back. He couldn't hit that 6-month time frame. It took him 8 months to get his stuff together. By the time you do your fire inspection and you deal with your homeowner's insurance, is 6 months enough time? If your house is destroyed by fire, is it enough time for you to get your business in order and get a building permit and start your process?
Probably not.
So we're leaving the 6 month, the 180-day time frame for if it's abandoned, like if it's a non-conforming use that has been abandoned, it's still 60 days. Like if somebody abandons that use, we're fine with the 180 days. But when it's destroyed, you know, by circumstances that are not your own, could you get a year? Any questions on that one? Okay. Oh, that was the last one. How about that?
Is
So-
a year enough? I mean, I think of the fires in California and what they're talking about, the ability to even get building supplies to.
There's a house downtown Lincolnton, that's, when Helene came through, it's still destroyed, but the trees fell over it, so. And I don't know how long it's gonna take them to get that finished, so.
And
Probably gonna be a while.
insurance and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but,
Might not be long
do we
enough.
need a state?
It comes back to them after a year, right? Like, I'll have to look at that. 'Cause I know the it may be rebuilt in a non-conforming manner only if a permit for construction has been issued by the Board of Adjustment.
Right. For commercial, it comes back to Board of Adjustment. For residential, it does not. And that's just the way it was in the ordinance previous.
So there's always, I guess, the option to add, that they need to secure it with 1 year, and that's an expiration date. If they don't get it taken care of in a year, then they can come to you
And ask for more time.
and ask for an extension.
I would rather have some kind of clause, and there could be some very good reasons, and I just think of, situations could happen, and, that would require more time, because we're living more and more in a complex world, not only materials, but litigation and insurances and all kinds of things. I wouldn't mind that gives that clause, that gives us due diligence to ascertain if it is a legitimate concern to extend it.
Okay, so if not obtained within 1 year, then bring it back to you guys.
That's my opinion.
I think that's a fair thing, sure.
What do others think? Steve, what do you think?
I think that's fine. 1 year,
And come back to us.
and then come back to us, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
That it could be extended by the Board of Adjustment hearing. I think that's a fair thing, sure.
I'm just thinking of what's happening to insurance now, and it's not like it used to be, so.
Right.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
And then, we always have to talk about our statement of consistency. So the statement of consistency for approval would be that it is consistent with the adopted Lincolnton Land Use Plan. It's not contrary to the goals and objectives out by the plan. And it's reasonable and in the public interest in the following ways. Because it updates the text language to match current procedures and best practices, it provides additional direction to assist citizens in understanding the regulations, and it's reasonable because it makes the ordinance clearer and more easily understood. And so on the vote on this is just a majority, and you have to figure out what your recommendation is going to be on the variance.
One question I got, the watershed and landscaping, you said nothing changed on that, you just referenced the different, so you're not like adding more trees or anything?
Oh, no, we're not adding more trees.
It just didn't have a link to it.
It didn't have a link to it. Some of these sections, like residential multifamily and that cluster development, they require screening, parking, but it doesn't say that in there. But we're supposed to know that it requires it. And a lot of people will read the ordinance while they're making their plan, and then they send us a plan. So we're trying to make it easier for them. Oh, I have to have landscaping, I have to have screening, I have to have parking. Here's the link to this section.
Would say, for multifamily, you have to have this.
Right.
But the multifamily section doesn't reference that.
Okay.
So we're just trying to make it easier so that you can find all the pieces that you need in one place.
I had written a note to myself, if I can read it. There's a section that talks about accessory structures,
Right?
and B, let's see, that it talks about that the buildings, it says excluding barns.
Agriculture has different rules.
Oh,
If you're a bona
okay.
fide farm, it's different rules.
But it's a city lot. Do we have?
City zoning covers the ETJ, and in R25 you can have agricultural uses.
Okay, so when it's talking about excluding barns, it's not specifically for a traditional.
Right. It has to be. So it would have to be a permitted use first. So if it were a barn, it probably wouldn't be in the city limits. We would look at it. So when somebody comes to apply, we look at the size. You have size requirements. You have to tell us what it is. Nobody has asked for a barn inside the city limits since I've been here in 8 years, but we have definitely had at least
Could be.
6 or 7 barns in the ETJ.
Okay, got it. And then,
the barn.
Yeah, what qualifies it as a barn?
Well, so there's different rules. If it's so, we check to see if it's a true agricultural use. Are you storing tractors? Are you storing animals? Like what's going in there? What's the use? The county actually requires some documentation, some tax paperwork and stuff to prove that you're a bona fide farm. But if you can prove you're a bona fide farm, you don't have to get a building permit.
So
just a
that-
zoning permit.
Is that section, like, if somebody wants a storage shed in the backyard, that's what this covers, right?
It does cover that.
And so it says, it's also primarily used for autos. And so, I mean, if I have just a garden shed that I want to put up and it fits all the requirements, and there's not going to be an automobile in there.
What that means, it has to be in your backyard or your side yard. If it's primarily for an automobile, you can have it in your front yard. So if it's a legitimate garage, you can be past your front setback line. If you're a garden shed, it cannot be in your front yard.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. So do we just need to look at Monte's language, for the 2 years and eliminate, what is it, F or section?
I mean, if you agree with me,
Yeah.
you don't have to
Well, I mean,
agree
do
with
we
me, but.
need to discuss that,
Yeah.
because I think that's the only piece that we have.
We were gonna add the Board of Adjustment hearing on the last section for the 1 year residential, 1 year. They could apply for an extension.
Right, on non-conforming uses.
Do we need to do that formally as a motion,
What's the rule? Or what do we need to do?
or does consensus, is
I
that?
think once you determine what your other language is gonna be, you could say we make a recommendation for approval with the suggestions
On the board.
up from the board.
Okay.
And if you wanna reference the section numbers, we can throw that in there for you. Cause one section is the 1 year that you did agree to, the extension, and then to the Board of Adjustment is section 153.137.
Good.
So you could reference, the changes to that. And then the variance section is 153.277.
Okay.
And that works?
So, do we do that through motion?
I think you figure out your language real quick and say what you want your clear language to be. We're gonna make notes to that.
Would you best
And
do
then
that?
your motion would be, I make a motion to approve
With the following changes?
with the following changes to these
All right,
chapters,
so with 153.277.
with modified language.
I would just make the change in section E from 1 year to 2 years.
Do I?
Back up on the
And
screen.
delete section
Find it in the sheet.
F is what I would.
Come back.
So basically, that would have the effect of making our variance expire after 24 months instead of 12. And then it would have to come back to the board if it's after that.
That would work just the same way, wouldn't it?
Basically gives them more time. I mean, I think that's fair.
Eliminate staff's ability to examine that again after 1 year.
Well, it will be valid for 2 years.
We're okay, we're okay with the not being able to evaluate after a year.
Let's just, devil's advocate.
What is the?
Just-
2 years. You've done 2 years? Send it back.
I
That
think
way it
it's
takes it off of
simple.
them.
It takes the pressure off those.
Exactly.
Right.
And it still puts a 2-year time limit on them. You need to get stuff done.
Right.
Is there any situation that the staff could identify some situation prior to the 2 years that would cause you enough concern to note back to the board?
I think if there's a 2-year expiration date, we can't do anything
Yeah.
in that time.
So that kind of gets, Jerry, to your
So what is it that
point.
you would want to do in that, what is it that you would need to do in that time frame that you can't now?
So as far as like the 2 years, all I'm saying, if there was a change to the ordinance or the property around it, and let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a situation that we've had. Maybe we had one that didn't overhang, that basically got approved to the edge of their property line. Well, in the meantime, something happens on the other property, you want a little bit more space. We want a different setback, something for that example. Then in the 2 years, it's locked in, we can't do anything about it, even though this changed. Now, that's something that we can't control, how things are developed after the fact. But if they're already completed, then that can be a factor for what happens later on.
Sure.
So it's just kind of, a way to reevaluate it if that's something that you want to actually happen. I don't have a particular circumstance in mind that we've really come across these. This, like I said, the verbiage was, we didn't have anything about plats at all. So at that point previously, they were just extended because nothing changed. So a large portion of it is correcting the language. So we're fine with whichever timeline you wanna do.
Would it make better sense to put a 1-year expiration on building permits, and then if it's a plat, a 2-year?
I don't see a problem with any way y'all wanna do that.
I mean, would there be any benefit to you guys, your department? Or would that be a non?
It's really not an issue. Plats are the biggest thing that we have that don't get recorded on time. Sadly, a lot of the people who get these, even though we explain the process, don't quite understand that they actually do have to be recorded. Or if they record it, and there's something, then a deed has to go along with it. We've had a lot of situations where it's one or the other. And until they actually go to do something with that property much later, they realize the lines aren't drawn, they're not there. So the plat, again, as long as it's, nothing's changed, those to me are the things we see most commonly. As far as other variances, you guys have dealt with, setbacks. That's been a big thing, especially like West Main Street Extension. So if he didn't, pull his permit, he ran into some grading things, I don't know, he just didn't get around to doing it, then we would have to allow him to reapply, go through the process, send out the letters, do the notifications, run the public, the notification in the newspaper, make sure that's done, get the signs out, just for a year later for you to say, the street hasn't changed, nothing's changed, we're gonna reapprove it. So that's just where this came from. Now, if for some crazy reason there was a road widening project and it had expired, obviously we would bring it back to you. And with that 1-year expiration or 2-year expiration, we have the ability to do that. When you take away the expiration, there's not a way for us to undo or reevaluate what's been done.
Okay. Well, and I think just in the interest of simplicity, I think it makes sense to give them extra time.
The 2 years, you mean?
How about in simplicity, we leave it at 1 year and it just comes back to the board? They've had a year to do everything that you have told them to do, and if they didn't do it, they would just have to go through the process again.
That's,
I'm sorry, I don't know if that means more work for y'all, that's not
So
my
just
point,
leave it
but
in here.
with all the concern, why switch it to something else when it works?
yeah.
A year is plenty of time, short of something devastating like COVID, and they can ask for an extension, correct? If they see that they're not gonna make it in a year, can they ask for an extension?
We don't have a policy, that allows an extension.
Okay,
That's kind of what this
Right.
was.
would remedy, but
Because I don't think there's a way for you guys to grant any type of extension without it being another public hearing. And that's the same amount of work as making them reapply.
Right.
It's the,
I guess for me, it's no time limit, a year, 2 years kind of is a compromise
Yeah.
for me. And then because there are those things that it's not the fault of the individual.
sure,
The COVID and the,
Right.
Sure.
the snow we're gonna have tomorrow and all those kind of things. So
it's still a year,
Right.
it's a long time,
Yeah, it is a long time. All right. Well,
but that didn't help.
I don't know. I'll stick with my same, I'm still willing to give it 2 years. I think it's fair. I think 2 years is fair.
How many times a year does this happen?
Not much.
One,
I
two
mean,
times a year?
at most, yeah.
I'd say
Just
just
send
keep
it
it
back
at
to
a
the
year.
board.
I
Keep it a year.
mean, one more person coming back, it's, you know, they don't hold risk. We just vote on it again. You know, it takes another 20, 30 minutes and be done with it.
It's fine, yeah.
The advantage of having them come back is then if you deny it, then they can appeal it to Superior Court.
Then,
I don't see how they get an appeal if staff denies it,
right.
because then it's not,
The ordinance says any staff decisions are appealed through a process where you go to the Board of Adjustment.
yeah, exactly, because you can't go back to Superior, they can't go directly to Superior Court. They can only go to Superior Court from a planning board. So,
Like a circle.
exactly,
might as well
might as well
just
just send them back.
leave it
If
alone.
you're gonna stick with the year, send them back to y'all, and, you know, if it's only one or two, hopefully we don't have to deal with it much. But at least that way, we cover all the public hearing side of things.
I agree.
To me, you know, I look at things differently, because I'm looking at them from the perspective of, what do I do when I get in the courtroom? Because that's when I'm gonna deal with it.
Right.
And I would just rather have said, yep, we sent them right back to the planning board said no, they have to appeal that. And then I'll deal with it over there. But if they kick it back, hey, like I said, I think it's, I totally get where they're coming from, but at the same time, you know,
I agree.
I hear
All right.
Paul's reservations, so the easy button, I think, is let them kick it back.
We'll take the
Put a year on
heat.
it, put a year on it, back to you.
And let us take the heat, yeah. Okay. Well, then I will amend my suggestion.
Okay.
I say, leave it at 1 year, delete section F. We'll add the Board of Adjustment appeal to the 153, 137 non-conforming structures.
Okay.
As it is.
All right, are we closing?
I would,
Hearing.
I can make a motion to recommend those edits.
Let her close the public hearing and then make your motion.
Okay, sorry.
So we're gonna close the public hearing, and I don't know if this is the correct procedure. Entertain a motion to approve, with board recommendations, the changes to chapter 153 text amendments. And then I'll just mention what we, as the board, want to amend, and that is 153.277 variances. We want to delete, to help me out, Lonnie,
Section F.
section F, and it would come back to the board for reapproval, or, and then in 153, 137, non-conforming, we want to extend the 1 year to 2 years.
No.
No,
No.
it'd be.
Leave it 1 year,
1 year.
but
and then-
allow the,
Okay, 1 year then back to the Board of Adjustments.
allow for, an extension to be applied for through the Board of Adjustment.
Is that good?
Perfect.
Does the clerk have all that?
And it's recorded.
So do I hear a motion for all of that?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
ZMA was withdrawn, that ZMA 1/2025 was withdrawn, so we don't have to do that one. So we can move on to the adjournment portion.
I ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.